This is a Flying Cow production.
Book 1, Water. Book 2, Earth. Book 3, Fire. Long ago, Nickelodeon introduced a series called Avatar: The Last Airbender. It combined great anime-style animation, strong storytelling, heart, and humor. It was great, and everyone that saw it loved it. Until one day, a terrible movie came out which everyone hated. But my co-host Loren Collins knows none of this because he's never seen the show. And that's why we are watching every episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender, because I believe this could be Loren's new favorite show. Or at least top 20. Well, hello and welcome back to Comets and Cabbages here on the Flying Cow. This is, of course, our Avatar: The Last Airbender rewatch podcast. I am your host, the Flying Cow himself, Clay Johnson, and it's all Jinwei's fault.
I'm Amanda Van Heil, and I'm staying away from those canyons.
And I'm Loren Collins, and I am not carrying any 100-year-old grudges.
It's good to know. Good to know. Yes, but like I said, we are here today talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender, moving right along in this series. Like I said, in the last episode, that was the end of the first half of the season. And this is now the beginning of the second half of the first season, book 1, as it is referred to. And I will say, this episode is called The Great Divide. It was directed by Giancarlo Volpe and written by John O'Brien, and debuted May 20th, 2005. And I guess we're just going to get right into it. Sorry, guys. I didn't have anything else that I wanted to talk about.
I have something else we can talk about. If we
okay.
We can revisit this for a minute.
Okay.
In our at the top of our previous episode, we were discussing the Netflix forthcoming adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender that's coming in February of 2024. I have discovered, after all our discussion of like how they're going to format this, they have released the episode titles of those 8 episodes.
Oh yeah, I already knew about that.
I didn't know that.
I don't have them memorized or
So
anything.
if we wanted to take a moment to like guess how this is going to map out, first episode is The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
The pilot, obviously. Episode number 2 is titled Warriors. So,
okay.
I think pretty likely that's going to be Kyoshi.
Yeah.
Sokka episode.
And maybe something else, I don't know. Number 3 is again pretty obvious. Simply Omashu.
Right.
Booty!
Yes.
Okay,
now,
so going on that, let's see. It looks like I would assume that maybe they're condensing, because I know that they're going to go to the Southern Air Temple. I would assume that they're condensing that into the first episode.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's when he goes, I really am the last airbender.
Yeah, because I mean, number one, it's too important of a beat for them not to hit.
Yeah.
It does seem weird to kind of push that into the pilot, though. I don't know. Maybe it'll be at the beginning of the Kyoshi episode.
I would suggest as a possibility that they've pushed it later. Like
possibly
simply as a matter of dramatic tension. I think it might work if you just push a little bit later for Aang to finally discover he is in fact the last airbender. Like, give a little more time where he's looking for his own people. Right. And then it comes as a bigger loss when it's not episode 3 when he discovers this.
Yeah. But then you said the next one is Warriors, which we assume is Warriors of Kyoshi. And honestly, I think that's what everyone is assuming. We've already seen that Suki is in the show.
Yes.
So
at the very least, it's Warriors of Kyoshi. We don't know whether any other elements have been mashed into it.
Right. Which to once again backtrack to the last episode, I completely forgot to bring up. There was a whole beat at the beginning of the episode where Sokka was complaining, was basically like throwing in his his bid for the leadership, where Katara just apropos of nothing is like, maybe this would be better if you got kissed by a girl. And Sokka's like,
kissed by a girl or actually kissed a girl, because that's the difference.
Well, she says if you've actually kissed a girl.
But
and
I don't
Sokka
think
said, I've been kissed by a girl.
Oh, okay.
And Katara says, Gran. And he goes, no, it's someone you haven't met. And she goes, I've met Gran. But I was like, he got kissed by Suki.
Yeah.
You've met Suki. I don't know what the deal is. Why have we forgotten about Suki? But
I guess I was thinking because he didn't kiss her, she kissed him.
They kissed though.
Wait a second. I'm sorry. What is the confusion here?
The issue was that Sokka or Katara is just like, maybe you wouldn't be so fixed on leadership if you had kissed a girl.
Did she know
like, I've kissed a girl?
Does she know he kissed her? Because they were by
themselves. I mean, yeah, they might not know, but then I'm like, why is Sokka not bringing up I kissed Suki?
He did bring it up. He said, like, I've kissed a girl.
Yes, but then she was like, who? And he goes, you don't know her. She knows Suki.
Well, I mean, maybe he just didn't want to admit to that. He's just trying.
But he's wanting to have proof, and him saying you don't know her does sound like he's making it up.
No, I mean he's lying one way or the other. I'm pretty sure there is no female Sokka has ever met in his life that Katara has not also met. They live in a tribe of like 8 people.
That's actually a very good point.
Yes.
You haven't met her. I've met Gran.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So episode 3 is Omashu. We know what that is. Obviously, that's the easiest of all of these.
Those 2 episodes are back to back, so they're just jumping. Yeah.
Yes. Episode number 4, and this is starting where I think I'm going to need y'all's input for just how this might be
what it is. Yeah.
Episode number 4 is Into the Dark. So,
okay, I think people have speculated that is kind of where the spirit world and the Avatar Roku, the whole winter solstice thing comes in.
We're assuredly going to get winter solstice stuff in here because that's
right.
Everything that happens, especially in the second episode, is too important to skip over.
Right. Well, and we saw there was a bit in the trailer where we saw basically a still of him like sitting in the burned forest.
Okay.
So that definitely, and we also saw an image of the Crescent Island. So, but I would imagine that episode is probably where that stuff is going to start. Okay. So yeah, you're right. They're definitely skipping the Haru episode. I don't know if maybe we will get Haru like we meet him like quickly in an episode and he's just like not a full episode, but
maybe he shows up in book 2.
Yeah,
maybe.
Or you
because I mean it's not super necessary for that episode to be in book 1 because we spend much more time in the Earth Kingdom in book 2.
Well, I'll say too, if you're rewriting this for hour-long formats, you might be able to sort of fold the events of Imprisoned into Warriors. Like you have more time to fill.
Possibly.
Yeah. So,
or even into Omashu. Maybe they say that he lives in Omashu. I mean, you probably wouldn't have time to do the whole break him out of prison thing, but just to introduce Haru.
Maybe my gut, and again, it's frequently wrong on this kind of thing. My gut says it'd be more likely to be Warriors because Omashu is basically like it's a more comic episode. It's leaning into that and like the tests that he's being put through.
I think that overall the series probably is not going to be leaning into comedy as much.
Maybe not, but I mean, there is an active conflict with the Fire Nation in Warriors of Kyoshi. There's no one's fighting the Fire Nation in Omashu. It's just a pretty. I mean, there might have been a subplot, where they don't interact, but like, they are self-contained in Omashu.
True. But yeah, I mean, I will say, I think that's kind of the vibe that I've gotten is that they're going to lean more serious, which honestly is one of the complaints that people had for the M. Night movie is that it was so serious. It was also so dumb, but yeah.
So Episode 4, like I said, is Into the Dark. Episode 5 is Spirited Away, which honestly sounds, based on what I've seen so far, the second half of Winter Solstice or something.
Right.
Or I would say the first half of Winter Solstice, but that's weird. So
yeah, I mean, I think I have heard that maybe one of those might be where we get the Zuko Aang backstory episode.
Yeah, again, this doesn't have to all fall in the same order.
Right,
So,
exactly.
Now, number 6. And maybe again, this is the backstory episode. Maybe this has something else coming up I haven't seen yet. Masks is number 6.
That's going to be Blue Spirit.
Yeah,
it is? Okay. All right.
That's what a lot of people have, which is coming up in a few episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Number 7 is The North.
That's going to be the beginning of the Northern Water Tribe.
The Northern Water Tribe, yeah.
And number 8 is Legends.
Yeah, so that's going to be the end of the Water Tribe.
Okay.
Bit. I mean, obviously, we're now talking about things that you haven't
That
seen
I haven't seen.
yet. Right.
They meet the North Water Tribe. That's what they've been
Yeah.
aiming to do the entire season.
Yeah, I will say the last 4 episodes of or maybe it's just 3. Yeah, the last 3 episodes of book 1, they're in the Northern Water Tribe.
That's fine. I mean, the show is called The Last Airbender. I am going to assume Katara is not also the last waterbender. So yeah, that's fine. By the way, incidentally, the fellow who directed the last episodes 7 and 8, his name is Jet.
Interesting.
Yeah. But all the episodes drop February 22nd. So
yeah, and it also sounds like they're not giving Jet his own episode, which honestly you don't need.
He doesn't need his full episode.
No, you just need to kind of establish him. But yeah,
he shows up in there somewhere. Heck, for all I know, maybe if they're only
I mean, some of those titles we're like, oh well, that's about this.
Yeah,
but some of them it's like it could be about this, it could be about that. Some of them are a little more vague. So yeah, I mean, interesting to see what they've got going on. I am, for some reason, I had in my head that they were going to do 10. I don't know why. I think 8 is fine. Like I said, there's still, especially this was a 20-minute run of 20 episodes. So doing 8, they're really just cutting out a little bit of the story, and they're probably cutting out more and just kind of expanding on stuff.
Yeah.
So
and a lot of these episodes are self-contained. Unless there's something important that needs to be set up, you can skip over that. Like in the episode we're here to discuss today.
Yeah. This is, like I said, The Great Divide. We've already gone over kind of the things. And I will say, and I'm going to bring this up now because I want to get you guys' take on it. Because I was actually surprised by this. Apparently, this is recognized as the worst episode in the series. And
that's good to hear. I'm excited to hear that news.
It actually has one of the lowest rated, and the next one is an episode in book 2 that I actually kind of like. I will say, going into this, I thought that, I really like that episode, and there are definitely parts of this episode that I do like, but then there are some parts that I'm like, yeah, okay, this doesn't work as well as I remember. But what do you guys think when you hear, this is rated as the worst episode? I mean, Loren, it sounds like you agree with that assessment.
That is I don't know how many what episodes are.
Sure, at least so far.
It is a relief to hear that. Because if I'm looking,
this is actually the high point in the series, Loren. If you don't like this, you won't like the rest of the show.
I mean, I've already seen the next episode, so we're good on that front. But no, you've established, we've just made our way through the first half of season 1. We have approximately 50 episodes to go.
Which, I mean, hearing that, this sounds like this was an odd one for them to start off the second half of the season.
No one cares about that half of the season here anymore.
No.
Mark. Yeah.
No, but still.
Yeah. I watched this thing. Spoilers. I did not like it. And so
okay.
But I wasn't sure. is where does internally, I'm not sure where this ranks in the quality level of the rest of the show. For all I know, this is a middling, and there are worse episodes to come that I'll have to suffer through. To be told that by and large, this is considered the worst episode of the series.
It has the lowest ratings.
This is the worst episode I will have to sit through. It will only get better from here. So that's
one way to look at it.
That is a relief to hear. It makes me want to, rejigger my scoring on this, just a hair,
Okay.
that I can take advantage of that fact, so that it doesn't skew my results in the future.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm glad to hear that there are not going to be too many episodes to rival this one for how unenjoyable it was.
Okay.
I just found it very forgettable.
Sure. See, honestly, there are definitely points of this that I really do remember, like the whole, the tribe aspect, and the disagreements between the two of them, and the story, that their backstory and all that kind of stuff. Those things I remember. I definitely didn't remember like some of the smaller elements of this, but let's go ahead and let's get into this. Because this episode starts off basically at the very beginning. This tells you what this episode is going to be about. It's going to be about arguments and people disagreeing, because we get the setup of, Sokka setting up the tent. And I mean, I will say that as a whole, Sokka's setting up this tent very sloppily, because it's all like bending in the middle and all this kind of stuff. Just doesn't look super impressive. But, Katara is like, you didn't put up the tarp. And he goes, oh yeah, thanks. And just throws the tarp in the tent. And Katara starts complaining. She's like, well, what if it rains? He goes, but it's the dry season. It's not going to rain. And they start having a fight and all this kind of stuff. And, this whole beginning, it's just reminding you, these two are siblings. In case we forgot, these two are siblings. They're going to argue like siblings. And, Aang kind of steps in and makes peace with them. He also actually makes peace between Appa and Momo, in a really interesting scene where they're arguing over a melon. And so Aang splits it in half with airbending. And it's very obvious that he gives the bigger half to Appa.
The bigger animal.
Yes, which
the one that is 1,000 times the size of the other. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I was with Momo for a second, because Momo's slice is like this big, and Appa's is like the whole rest of it.
Momo's side is like a third the size of Momo.
Yes, yeah. But, Momo just looks at him and he's like, what? He's got 5 stomachs. And honestly, when he said that and I looked at Momo's portion, I'm like, honestly, that's actually probably more than Momo needs.
Yes.
But
Momo largely feeds on like berries and nuts. So yeah, like a third of a watermelon or something. That's
he doesn't need that much. But yeah, so
incidentally, you casually tossed it off. It's like, I'm not sure we've seen, and we may have seen Aang use an air knife before, but
we've seen him obviously like slash through like water and stuff with, but like actually like to slice things. No, I think
solid matter. Yeah. Because that would seem to imply that, like, if he just wants to, like, I don't know, cut people in half, he can do that.
Yeah.
Just go full Darth Maul on, like,
yeah. Do like the Hannibal thing. And did you guys ever watch that show? Hannibal?
Are you talking about like take off the top of the head, or where he sliced?
There was that episode where he bisected that woman.
Yes.
And in like slices.
Yes.
Like really messed up, but like one of them, like that is one of those images that I remember the most from that show.
This is the kind of stuff the Netflix show can do. What
if Aang was a serial killer?
Yeah. What What if we did like the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey version of Avatar: The Last
Of
Airbender?
Avatar: The Last Airbender. Just slicing through people with air.
Yep.
All right. All right. So yeah, so we set up that, you know, there's disputes between the two of them, but it seems like Aang settles it, and they go to they come up to this canyon. And initially they're just like, oh, it's no big deal. We can just fly over it with Appa. But immediately they while they're just kind of looking over the canyon, a very fussy person butts in. And I immediately clocked that this guy was voiced by Scott Menville, which is a shout out to Loren and I's previous podcast, Around the World, where we discussed Scott Menville because he is in the film Ernest Goes to Camp. He plays Crutchfield in that. Yeah, he's you know,
And he is now perhaps best known as Robin in Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
he's a
related to
very
Symphonia.
yeah, very prolific voice actor. I will also say a little bit after we watched that or we did that episode, Loren, I had started my watch of Quantum Leap, and not only is Scott Menville in an episode of Quantum Leap, he's actually in the opening credits for a good portion of that show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there's a bit, there's the bit in that show where Scott Bakula's character jumps into people, but he always looks in the mirror to like see what he actually looks like, and we see a young acne covered braces laden Scott Menville looking in the mirror.
Oh wait, so Scott Menville is one of the people he leaps into?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So we don't actually ever hear him speak in the show.
No. He's just a mirror reflection of.
But he's in the opening credits.
Huh.
Of at least the first like 3 seasons of that show.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah. So. Like I said,
by the way, that like he showed up, we both clocked his voice, and then he plays almost no role in the rest of the episode.
Yeah, that is a little disappointing because basically he's just there to like save the space for his tribe. Yeah. He is a member of the Ganjin tribe, and as you can see, these guys are like impeccably dressed, like almost comically so, like to the point where it's actually very impractical how nicely dressed they are, because like they're like pristine and like in white robes.
Yet why would anybody wear white in the around the Earth Kingdom area?
Exactly. Like it's really, like I said, very impractical for where they live. But when he shows up, it's just him, and he's like, "I'm saving my spot for the guide through the canyon. We're next, and of course, I will say there's a funny bit where Sokka is like making fun of him behind his back while he's like, we're next, and then he's just like, yeah, we don't care, you're next, you can have your spot, whatever. But then we immediately see some dust in the distance coming up, and they're like, oh, is this your tribe? And come to find out, no, it is the Zhang tribe, who are basically the opposite of the Ganjin tribe, whereas the Ganjin are very, erudite and, very clean and everything. These guys, their clothes are made out of animal skins. In fact, like the leader has an animal head on her shoulder as like a shoulder pad, for crying out loud. But they're, in browns and animal skins, very, earth tones. Whereas, as we said, the Ganjins are all like in white and pristine and, very well kept and everything. And, basically the problem is presented that there's only one guide through this canyon who is an earthbender. The guide, by the way, is a lot of fun, especially through the first little bit of his part of the episode. And he is played I looked this up. He is played by Leonard Stone, who, if anybody has ever seen the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, he's Violet Beauregard's dad.
Violet, you're turning violet, Violet.
Yeah, exactly, that guy. And like I said, his character in this, the earthbending guide, is a lot of fun. He's just like, you guys can argue, I don't care, I'm just doing my job, all this kind of stuff. But basically, so there's only one guide. The Ganjin claim that they have the right to the guide first because they sent ahead, but the Zhangs are like, but our tribe was here first. And the guide is just like, I don't take reservations. I can't lead people who aren't here, but at the same time, I'm not getting in the middle of this. You guys, sort this out. And so Aang, who has basically just dubbed himself, the arbitrator of fairness, basically decides that he is going to sort all of this out. So, we hear arguments from both tribe leaders, which, by the way, I haven't mentioned that the Ganjin tribe leader is voiced by Rene Auberjonois, who I love. Rene Auberjonois. He's also a very prolific voice actor. He is the voice of Louis the Chef in The Little Mermaid, the original animated version. He is also played Odo in Deep Space Nine, for any Star Trek fans out there. Prolific actor. Passed away, I think, right like in 2019, I think, like right before the pandemic. Like Rene Auberjonois is an acting legend, absolute amazing presence. But like I said, he is the voice of the Ganjin leader, and he's like, well, our old people, need some help, so we need to go through first. But the Zhangs are like, but we have sick people, they supersede old people. So finally Aang is just like, tell you what, we've got one guide. Appa can fly across the sick and the elderly on the canyon, and we'll all use the same guide. We'll all go in together, and the three of us will stay basically to keep the peace. He doesn't say that, but I think that's what's implied, because otherwise I'm just like, why don't Sokka and Katara also fly across? Because Sokka's just like, oh, we have to walk so far. I'm like, you don't have to. You could, because nobody's flying Appa. Appa's just kind of doing this himself. Let's hope Appa knows what he's doing. I mean, he does, because he's Appa and he's awesome. But they just kind of leave the sick and the elderly, in the hands of, I guess, Appa and Momo. Because I don't think, do we see Momo in the canyon?
I don't remember.
If we do, he doesn't make much impact. So I'm assuming that Momo goes with Appa. They're friends again, so they're in charge.
It's probably for the best that Appa and Momo are in charge.
Yeah. But yeah, so
we were talking in the previous episode about who's the leader of the group. It should be
Appa.
It's Appa. Yeah, absolutely. So, they go into the canyon, and like I said, at first, the guide here is just, I wrote down, that he's really funny. He's a lot of fun. He warns them before they even go into the canyon. We cannot take food because it will attract, animals, basically, that could attack us. So make sure that you get rid of your food, either eat it or throw it away, but you can't have it in the canyon. So they all go into the canyon, and not far in, pretty much they get down to the bottom of the canyon, and they are immediately attacked by what they call a canyon crawler, which kind of looks like a fuzzy spider with like
a wolf
a
spider.
bigger, like it's
giant wolf spider.
Yeah, got a lot more going on. with it. But and wouldn't you know it, it attacks the guide, and the Aang takes care of the canyon crawler, but immediately when they go to check on the guide, Katara's like, "Oh, both of your arms are broken." I'm just like, both of his arms are broken? Fuck. But
I'm impressed that she could tell that both were broken too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because at this point, we don't know that Katara has any, medical training or anything. But
I mean,
but yeah,
they just didn't show us the angle where like the bone is poking out of the skin.
yeah, no, I'm glad for that. But yeah, later on, like he's got like a splint on one arm and the other arm's in a sling.
Yeah, the other one's in a sling. That doesn't really say broken to me. So
I mean, I would imagine that maybe like on one arm it's like maybe his femur, but on the other one it's like just like his tibia or fibula or something like that.
Yeah.
So maybe that it can be in a sling. But wait, did I say femur?
You did.
I did.
You also said tibia and fibula, which are also legs.
Those are also leg bones. Yeah. Apparently, I don't know the bones of the arms, but I know the legs really well, right? The ones in the arms, they're just smaller femurs and smaller tibias and fibulas, right?
Sure.
That's how that works. It's the radius and the ulna.
Radius is this one, ulna is this one, because you squeeze the radial bone in a bunch of locks that I do.
That's right. I don't remember what the upper arm bone is called.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Arm femur.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. The arm femur. We might have just named the episode. Who knows? The arm femur. But yeah. So his arms are broken, and he immediately says, "Without my arms, I can't earthbend." Which humorous. Okay. Yeah. I don't think he's laughing.
No.
No, he is not. But yeah. So apparently, this guy can only earthbend with his arms, which we've already seen. Earthbenders like Boomy, who can like do it with like like their feet and stuff like that. So I'm just like, okay, so this guy, he's just got like his basic earthbending down apparently. I mean, he's just a guide in a canyon. It's not like he needs to be like a high level earthbender for that job. Unless of course you get your arms broken, in which case maybe you need to learn. But yeah, so Aang kind of takes over like the leadership of this, and basically the two tribes just start arguing so much that he's just like, fine, you know what? We're in a canyon. You guys take this side, you guys take that side. And it's at this point that I'm like, it's really convenient that there are two paths in the canyon that just so happen to go parallel to each other. It's very, very convenient for this episode. But he sends, Katara with the Ganjins and Sokka with the Zhangs. Basically he's just like, see if you can keep the peace and see if you can find out why these two are mad at each other, because it's established that, these two have been warring tribes for, they say, exactly 100 years. And it's important to note that because it's going to come back. But yes, they have been at war for 100 years. So Aang's like, see if you can get to the bottom of this. And so I will say, though, if Aang had been thinking, he might have flipped the two of them because, the Ganjins obviously fit more of Katara's philosophy, and the Zhangs definitely fit more of Sokka's philosophy. And they quickly take sides.
Yep.
Like literally just by seeing that each side sets up the tent the way that they want it, they're just like, I'm with you guys.
Yeah.
That's all it really takes.
Like, you guys get me.
Yeah, exactly. But
They rather conveniently revisit the exact specific conflict that Katara and Sokka had off the episode. Yeah.
Exactly.
To the letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course the Ganjins and the Zhangs both bring up the same argument that each one of the siblings brought up.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it's the dry season, and besides, it's a nice blanket. Well, who cares if it's the dry season? Just in case, better safe than sorry, that kind of thing. But yeah, so it is then revealed that both sides brought food because they both assumed that the other side would assume that they brought in food and bring in food themselves.
Yeah.
So either way, they were correct.
Right. But basically, by doing that, they also proved the other side right. I'm just like...
They proved the other side right and themselves right.
Do they ever say how long
exactly.
the journey is across the canyon? I forget.
Huh?
Do they ever say how long the journey is across the canyon?
I mean, at one point somebody says 1,000 miles, but I think they're just exaggerating.
That's gotta be the length of the canyon. No, for them, then they're clearly not following this dude for 1,000 miles.
No,
So,
I mean they do it in a day.
that's what I mean.
So
That's
it
what
really can't be that long.
That's what I mean. Him guiding them crossways is a day or slightly over.
Well, I mean a day or two because they do stop to camp.
Okay, yeah, they do spend the night. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not a huge sacrifice to go that amount of time without food. That's
Well, I mean, he literally says, "Oh, you really can't go a day without food."
Yeah.
So he sees it as a day journey.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
By the way, I will say that as down as I was on this episode at the start, and I'm going to be down on it again. That one of the things, this is going to come back later. Spoilers, as my cabbages moment. The one thing I did find intriguing in this episode was the different animation styles used as each side told their version of their conflict. Their Hatfield and McCoy conflict here.
Yeah, and I was just about to get to that because, like I said, it's revealed that each side actually brought food, and it's at this point that basically, Katara, this bumps Katara. She's like, "Oh, so you guys brought in food?" Yeah, exactly. She's like, because Katara sees them as kindred spirits, but they broke the rules. And it's like, but you brought in food, and they're just like, yeah, but we know they brought in food, so Katara, it's not
you have
fair
no room
for
to talk,
us
you
to
stole from
starve.
pirates.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that logical reasoning. And Katara has this line, which I had to bring it in.
Well, I guess it's okay if everyone's doing it.
Oh. Which sounds like it came from an after-school special.
Yep.
I was
like somebody needs to Photoshop just a cigarette over the piece of bread instead.
Yeah, like it really is like straight down the line after-school special. I do wonder if any younger kids or what do they even understand after-school specials anymore? Like basically it was this time during like the 80s and 90s where there would be specific like special episodes.
Very special episodes.
Yes, where like it would all be about like not succumbing to peer pressure or, and some of them weren't even like parts of regular shows. Some of them were straight up after school specials that were like specifically this was written for this meaning. But
and then they would show up at the end of the episode. Like one would have backwards hat, and they're all wearing stupid outfits.
Oh yeah,
they're all just like, we don't do drugs.
Really over the top, like silliness. I will say though, I called this clip "Everyone's Doing It," which is could also be a very odd way to explain an orgy. You
are not wrong.
Yeah. But so they're they're sharing the food. I will say when Sokka finds out that the Zhangs brought in food,
He's just like, all right.
he's just they're just like, you want food? And he's like, yes. And then the Zhang is just like, I bet you're wondering why we brought in food. And he's like, oh, yeah, I was wondering. He didn't care. He was just hungry.
Sokka's like, if they brought out a keg and it was a keg party, he's like, oh, yeah, I'll take some.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
But back to what Loren brought up, they each share their story of why this conflict started. And basically, just to kind of give the bare bones of it, the Ganjins believe that their one of the patriarchs of their village, Jin Wei, was carrying an orb from one side of the town to another as part of like a redemption ritual, and that a Zhang known as Wei Jin stole it from him, like just beat him up and stole the relic from them. Whereas the Ganjins believe, or sorry, the Zhangs believe that Wei Jin found Jin Wei trying to do this ritual, and basically had like passed out, and Wei Jin tried to help him, and the guy was like, no, carry the orb, it's more important. And Wei Jin was like, I'll go get you help. And when he went to the town, he got arrested and imprisoned for 20 years. I will say it's honestly possible that both are true, because both kind of like the Ganjin story like it ends where the Zhang story picks up.
I mean,
And
yeah,
so
that's what it's going for. Is that
Yeah.
two different? You know, your I forget the name. Two different conflicting accounts of it, which aren't necessarily conflicting on the facts of it, but conflicting on the
Right.
interpretation of what happened.
Exactly, it's obviously different perspectives of the same story, but yeah, and to your point, you know, this is what the Ganjin story looks like, you know,
Yep.
very nice and sleek, and everybody looks very, you know, and whereas the Zhang story is all of these like, you know, hard angles and, you know, just much rougher look of animation. But yeah, no, honestly, I think that's honestly part of my favorite part of the episode too, is the different animation style.
The Rashomon accounts here of their conflict. Yes.
Did anybody else think it was interesting that these two, you know, Jin Wei and Wei Jin, it's basically the same name, just flipped?
Yes.
Did anybody else think it was possible that these were actually the same guy?
Hadn't really thought of that.
That crossed my mind. It did.
Yeah.
I was trying to process like how that would work, because neither story works if they're the same dude.
Maybe they're cousins.
It was very clearly set up to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we will get to the way that the story resolves it later, but I did find it very interesting. I mean, obviously they're related in some way.
Yeah.
So
I'll note here too, since I was talking about the animation styles and how that was one thing I liked in this episode, that contrasts honestly with the animation style throughout much of the rest of the episode. I didn't think, by and large, this episode looked as good as a lot of other episodes. Like the animation to me looks more exaggerated,
a little sloppier,
cheaper, and sloppier than we've seen. You know, if only to contrast with the very next episode we're going to talk about.
Sure.
But we got a lot more of like the exaggerated anime stuff. We got one shot of just like Aang giving like the giant anime eyes, which thing in a while. We got a lot more comic sound effects laid over the animation in ways that isn't used as often and as frequently. When they're doing the 10th thing at the beginning, there's a ton of sound effects overlaying like every time they move an arm, basically.
Yeah.
And that was an annoyance for me. And I've, even when they finally get to the fight with the canyon crawlers, like some of the choices of angles and direction and just the animation in general, all of it just seemed sloppier. So I don't know if I don't know how to look up what animation studios worked on stuff, but I'd be curious to know. If this
I will say,
specific.
this was all like done by a Korean studio.
Oh, sure.
Now, I will say I have and I believe it's the same studio that did all of it, but it's Titmouse. The same studio that now does Lower Decks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I did not know.
So, yeah, I mean, I just saw it in the now I don't know if maybe that was just certain sequences, but I definitely saw it in the credits of one particular episode. It credited Titmouse with the animation. But yeah. So you know, they both tell their story, and of course, you know, Aang and Katara come out fully buying, you know, the version of the story that they have heard. And I will say it's at this point that they kind of like give like the cliff notes of each version of the story, but Aang still never gets the full story of either side, but somehow he just knows the details later. Well, you know, we can talk more about that later, but obviously the truth is probably somewhere in between the two stories. So you know, they come out, and it's obvious that these guys aren't gonna work to get together very well. But all they need to do is just get out of the canyon. They've basically traversed the canyon. They just now need to get out. They need to climb the wall, which is going to be hard now that they don't have an earthbender. And basically at this point, the Ganjin and the Zhangs just break out into a full-out battle. You know, it seems like their rivalry has kind of been at a cold war, like this past 100 years, but now they're actually going to come to blows. And you know, Aang basically, you know, stops it and airbends and knocks them all on their asses. And when he does that, he reveals that they were all sneaking food, to which Aang is very upset because he apparently was the only person that went the whole journey without food, and now he's starving. But this also, the food attracts not just one, but a ton of canyon crawlers. And they initially start to, you know, fight them off, but eventually Aang realizes that if you put the feed sacks around the canyon crawlers, you can actually like ride them and use them to get out of the canyon. And so that is what they do. And the Zhangs and the Ganjins actually work together to get this done. And they all get out of the canyon, and it seems like all is well. And even the Ganjins and the Zhangs seem to be, you know, at, you know, on good terms. But then they're just like, yeah, but our history, we got to fight. Urgh! And finally, Aang steps in, and he's just like, wait, Jin Wei? I know those guys. They were brothers. They were 8 years old, and they were playing a game, and he didn't steal it. He just, you know, got the ball and all this kind of stuff, and basically just makes it sound like you guys are completely misunderstanding this whole thing. It was just a game that they were playing. They were actually really good friends and brothers, and you know, the only thing that's accurate is that, you know, Jin Wei was, you know, really stuffy, and that Wei Jin was a bit of a slob. But otherwise, it was just a game, nothing to take seriously. And they're just like, oh, okay, because he's like, I was there 100 years ago, which is believable because he, you know, was alive back then. And they're just like, oh, okay, I guess we can be friends and be one tribe now. So they're all going to go together now they say specifically they're going to Ba Sing Se, which is the capital of the Earth Kingdom. And so they are on their way, and Katara and Sokka is just like, wow, it's really cool that you knew those guys. He's just like, yeah, cool, convenient, or maybe I was lying, because he just made the whole thing up, which I will say, I've always thought that explanation, I'm just like, I feel like if it was just a game, it wouldn't have been like something that they were bringing up 100 years later. Like, this seems like a really easy way to resolve this. And him explaining that it was this end, honestly, has always been the thing that has bumped me the most. Like, it seems the most convenient, the most, even with him saying, "Oh, I just made it up," it still feels like, and they believed it.
I appreciate Aang's ingenuity in like trying to solve the problem through fiction, but like you say, it doesn't work either way.
No.
Either like it's too. My issue, honestly,
they seem really willing to believe this.
My issue wasn't so much that it was too mild a conflict for them to still care about it 100 years ago. Honestly, if you had it be 500 years ago or something like that, I could probably buy it. My problem was that it's only 100 years ago. These are two very distinct tribes.
And they have some old people.
Have some, I mean, like Rene Auberjonois' character probably has to be at least 70 years old. Which means that, and this conflict is only 100 years old. Yeah. So, like, how much difference in their cultures based on two brothers could they have made by the time the brothers turned 40? Like, each of them, and for everyone to forget that, like, these are their first cousins. These are like, that's
well, especially because according to the Zhangs, Wei Jin was in prison for 20 years.
Yeah. And
so you would feel like somebody would know whether that's true or false.
You're right. If it happened 100 years ago, then he got out 80 years ago, which is barely before Rene Auberjonois was born. So it does not track to me that the two cultures we see, which are very different and do not appear, like I said, appear to have any familial relationship to each other. They're just rival clans.
It's a little too shallow of time, but obviously they did that so that it would fit in within the time that Aang would have been alive, so that it could have been believable. But no, I mean, it's still. I mean, you still could have said, "Oh, it was like 200 years ago," and then Aang could have been like, "Oh, wow, this story has changed a lot because back 100 years when I heard it, it went like this."
That's a better solution to that. That Aang, back before the war with the Fire Nation, he just has a better recollection of what happened. Like, what we have is lazy, like.
Well, because at the very least, they could just be like, "Oh, so this story has changed. Maybe even your version isn't what actually happened." So
also one of the, like what did I write this down? Ganjin,
the Ganjin,
Ganjin, their version involves like this sacred orb. But they just take it as a given when Aang says that, like, oh, it was a soccer ball.
It seems like that would have been something that maybe they would still have or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
Or if they didn't, like, there would be some recollection that the sacred orb is not just like a ball they were playing with that day.
I will say the one thing that I am like, okay, like I said, it seems like they are very willing to believe this story. Like, they want this conflict to be over. In which case, I'm just like, well, then it doesn't really matter. As long as they have somebody telling us it's not as bad as you think, I think that's enough. I think that they could have done it a little better where the story didn't have so many holes. But Amanda, do you have any thoughts about this?
I think just the idea of being like, oh, this is how I remember it.
I mean, what it is it's kind of a version of like a Rashomon thing. The problem is that each version, like I said, they're not even telling the same part of the story. They're telling, different parts of the story. So they're really not even like contradicting each other. With the exception of, the intention.
The better solution to that is either to come along and say, like, here's context both of them are missing out on, either before or after, or something they've both misinterpreted over the last 100 years. That, like, kind of to the point Aang's making. It's just like you're just not right. You both misinterpreted something.
Yeah,
and
and I get that they wanted the comedic beat of, oh, Aang just made it up because he could, because he was alive. But they could have, like I said, instead just be like, oh, that story's changed a lot. Here's how I heard it.
Yeah.
You know, and he just made that version up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I just generally don't find like an 8-year-old who spends 2 minutes is going to somehow turn that into 20 years.
Yeah, I'm like, that just doesn't seem like the stuff of legend.
No,
a game that they played one time. One time that they played this game
when they were 8. Yeah, I could believe Aang would.
You imagine if it's a game, they played it a lot.
Yeah.
Why is this the one version that's always brought up?
Yeah, I can believe Aang would make up this lie. I cannot believe everyone is gullible enough to just like, oh, well, I guess everything we know is wrong. And it was just, it was that way all along. No, everything, like I said at the start, the episode's just kind of lazy. It's disposable also, too. Like you said earlier, they're just, I forget why they can't just fly over the canyon, why they're even just lounging on the side of the canyon at all, other than to get a view of it. And then, like, the conflict here begins by literally a character just walking up and introducing himself and introducing the plot of the episode.
Sure.
Like, injecting himself for no reason. That was just an incredibly lazy way to kick things off. And a lazy way to resolve stuff. Yeah, it's not a good episode.
All right. Well,
this was
is
like
there anything
they just needed some filler and
we have plotted 19 episodes.
A little bit. Yeah.
What else can we do? I checked on a couple things. One, I was curious, was I right about the animation studio? It turns out there are 3 different animation studios that sort of split the job across 60 Avatar episodes.
Oh, okay.
One of them is DR Movie. It handled the animation in 19 Avatar episodes. This was its 5th.
Oh, okay.
They also did Southern Air Temple, King of Omashu, and both parts of Winter Solstice, and then this.
Okay.
And honestly, that track,
because some of those earlier ones I don't remember looking bad.
They didn't look as bad, but I will say Omashu does have some of the exaggerated stuff that I do see here.
Sure.
For example, Omashu, if you recall, had the freeze frame gag, which I liked there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something slightly more unusual. What was the other thing I also was curious if the fellow who wrote this episode, what else he had done, and it turned out the answer is yes. Actually, it was John O'Brien. He's written a bunch of stuff. So
he did the Waterbending Scroll, King of Omashu.
Yeah,
those looks like are the ones that we've covered so far, at least.
Yeah. I pulled him up here. He was the main writer on a dozen or more episodes here.
Yeah. I mean, it does look like the most consequential one, though, that he wrote was the King of Omashu.
Okay. So far, yes.
Yeah.
The other 2 he's written have been 2 of the disposable episodes, honestly, though. So
honestly, I will say, sorry, just to because I'm looking at this on the Wikipedia page in the episode description. It describes the canyon crawlers as resembling a cross between a spider and a crocodile.
That works. Yeah. I was trying to figure out just the snout of the thing, but yeah. More like,
because it does kind of have like a crocodile-ish.
It does.
I mean, but it's red. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else that we want to talk about before we move forward about this episode?
Do I have anything else? No. I have absolutely nothing else.
There's not really much about the episode to talk about.
Yeah. All right. Well, then,
right. This is not getting its own Netflix adaptation.
No, probably not. It's probably one of the ones that's going to go on the cutting room floor. All right. Well, then let us go ahead and let us get into our My Cabbages moment.
My cabbages! My cabbages! My cabbages!
Which is, of course, the part of the episode where we discuss our favorite or most interesting scene. This is going to be interesting here. So, Amanda, I'm going to let you go ahead and start. What was your my cabbages moment?
That would have to be when Sokka and Katara are with their respective gangs, and Katara does the whole, well, I guess if everyone's doing it, I'll eat. And meanwhile, Sokka's like, all right.
Yeah. Sokka takes no explanation.
Yep.
Nothing.
So I think
He's just like,
specifically Sokka.
Well, he even says later on, he apologizes to Katara. He's like, yeah, I really only took their side because they fed me. and which, once again, we prove that one of Sokka's greatest motivations is food. If you feed him, he's on your side. Let's hope that the Fire Nation never feeds Sokka.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Loren.
I established this earlier. It's the nicely contrasting animation styles on the two stories from the two clans. That was a nice standout. It nicely reflected sort of the idiosyncrasies and sort of nature of both clans somewhat, even if the stories themselves were kind of dumb.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to back you up there, and I'm also picking those two stories. I really enjoyed, how not only the animation style is different from the rest of the episode, but they so fit with the aesthetic that we've set up for each one of these tribes. And so it's a really cool, the Ganjins is very sleek and elegant, and the Zhangs is very kind of rough and jagged edges and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really cool.
A lot more thick lines and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, then now it is time for our Mako Award, which is our favorite or most interesting character of the episode. So let's see. Loren, we'll go ahead and we'll start with you. Who gets your Mako Award?
I know we've been, depending on the episode, this can go either to the character or the actor. And it is Mako, who's after all is the voice actor, not the character. So in that case, I'm just going to give it to Renee.
I thought you might.
Always a pleasure to have him show up.
Because I mean, as much as you might not like the episode, he does a great job with this character.
He does.
He really, fulfills this very erudite, stuck up kind of, it really fits. It really fits.
So some of the dialogue he had to deliver was really just sort of flat. I mean, the delivery wasn't, but the actual dialogue itself was just kind of simplistic and frustrating.
And he does a great job with it.
Hearing his voice was nice. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, Amanda, who gets your Mako Award?
Oh, I've got to give it to Scott Menville. Like, even though his character wasn't all that big of a deal, just hearing him, especially right after having played Tales of Symphonia, and he voiced the lead in that game as well, and just being like, I know that voice. And then just hearing him throughout the show, like, because he plays just extra characters throughout the series. And just anytime I spot it, I'm like, hey, I hear Scott Menville.
Yep. Well, then I am going to make this a side character trifecta. And I am actually giving it to the guide, the Canyon guide, voiced by Leonard Stone. There was a bit that I actually forgot to bring up, but I was like, you know what? I can bring it up here because, he breaks his arms. He gets, caught by the canyon crawlers. Well, when the canyon crawlers come back, he has this wonderful moment of paranoia.
They're coming back for me. They've had a taste, and they're coming back for me.
So he is convinced that these canyon crawlers are here just because he's so tasty, which is great because it's not only paranoid, but it's the most egotistical form of paranoia. It's they're here for me because I'm just so delicious. Darn my delicious tasting body.
It'd make more sense if he'd lost an arm or something earlier, not just broken one, and then he could have this whole Captain Hook paranoia.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a Captain Hook thing, and he didn't lose a limb. I will say though, I think they're less likely to have him lose a limb in a kid's show, but at least where we actively see it.
If you were already established to be missing an arm, that would be
right.
different.
Right. But
That would have made
yeah,
the episode better. Yeah, that's why he warns everybody you can't bring food. This is why I do not have
yeah,
a
yeah.
Yes.
But I just thought that was a very funny. Like I said, I had fun with that character, and I thought that was a really funny, way to express his paranoia.
Yeah.
But
Also, by the way, if he had been missing an arm up front, then he would have only needed to break one arm in order to to sideline him, as opposed to like oh no, I broke both of my arms in that game. Nothing else, but just both arms. Yeah.
I mean, he could have just been like missing a hand or part of a finger or something like that. Yeah. All right. Well, then
he's very dependent on like this finger.
Yeah. All right. Well, it doesn't sound like it's going to be very high, but let us go ahead and rate the episode on the Avatar State Meter. This, of course, is ranking it from 1 to 5, 5 being the best, the show at full power, 1 being the worst, could deal the show a fatal blow. But we're going to go ahead and I think Amanda. Yeah, Amanda, I'm going to have you go ahead and rate this episode first. What do you give this?
I'm going to give it a 2.5.
Okay.
Because it's not that great, but it did have some good voice actors. And it's not a terrible episode. It had its moments. It's just forgettable.
I honestly think the reason I had such fond memories are some of the performances.
Yeah, it had some fantastic
the episode itself. Yeah. All right, Loren.
Before we started recording, I was leaning towards giving it a 2. But when you mentioned that like the general fan consensus is that this is the worst episode ever, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 1.5. I will trust them on this and hope that I never end up with having to equal this or lower it. But it leaves me the range of the scores above a 1.5. Sure. For anything else. But yeah. I honestly don't anticipate doing rewatches of Avatar in the future, like you have established you have done multiple times. But if that were ever to happen, I don't anticipate myself revisiting this episode.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna then split the difference, and I'm just gonna give it a 2. I don't dislike this episode, but it's definitely not very strong. Like I said, I realized that because I think when I looked at the next couple of episodes coming up, like the next 4 episodes, I was like, oh, there's some really good ones. I was thinking that this was a good, strong episode. And when I rewatched it, I was like, it's kind of not great. But there are some great performances in it, which I think is what I was really thinking about. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one a 2. All right. Well, we're gonna want to go ahead and let people know where they can contact us. So, of course, you can contact me at the Flying Cow Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Email at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. Oh, wait, hold on. Forgot one last thing. Know the answer, but Loren, is this your favorite show now?
Oh no.
It would have been great if you were like, yeah. No.
Yeah, I'm giving up on the show entirely after
just remember, it's not going to get any worse than this.
Enjoy the rest of the podcast. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I said. Like, I appreciate learning that
this is the low point.
Yeah, this is the low point. If it turns out it's not,
I was about to say, if we ever get to an episode that you're like, this is worse.
Yeah, if we get 3 episodes later and it's like, what is this, Drek? You have deceived me for the last time, Ray Johnson.
You promised me. Yeah. All right. But yes, like I said, make sure you check out all of our stuff, all of our other shows, discussions around the world. We're all on YouTube. If you do want the podcast version, you can go to the patreon.com/theflyingcow. You can get everything on a podcast fee for only $1. You can get it over there. And if you want to get our stuff early, you can do so for only $10, which is great. So yeah. Loren, Amanda, what you guys got going on?
Which one's going first? I'm sorry.
I thought I was in the middle of a yawn, so I figured you would just take that opportunity. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Sorry, my head's pounding, so I'm like
Oh, I'm sorry.
halfway listening. So you can find me on Zelda Universe TV on YouTube talking about Zelda. You can find me on Twitter at Amanda Van Heil and on Twitch at Panda Princessa.
All righty.
Loren. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Loren Collins. Lately, I've been tweeting about something which I'm certain is of interest to our listening audience, which is debunking various aspects of Dinesh D'Souza's 2000 Mules. So, yeah, definite crossover material there. Yeah. And by the way, for what it's worth, just to cite something else, having had a Star Trek actor in this episode, that one of my little side projects I want to work on. I tried this a couple years ago. I'm going to try it again. If anyone out there in the listening audience wants to help lend their support or money to this, I am going to try to convince a local jurisdiction to declare itself the birthplace of a Star Trek character. And maybe, fingers crossed, get a monument up for that. Because I think it's Riverside, Iowa, something like that, has declared itself the birthplace of James T. Kirk.
James T. Kirk. Yep.
There's a town in Scotland that has declared itself, like in a couple years ago, the birthplace of
Montgomery Scott.
And there is a town up in Ohio, I think. I just learned about this last week, that declared itself the birthplace of Catherine Janeway and erected a fairly nice, elaborate little monument that she herself has visited.
Wow.
So yeah, I want to make this happen. So
are you going to tell us the character?
I could. Do you want to know who the character is?
Yeah.
Bones McCoy.
Oh.
In Georgia?
DeForest Kelly himself is from Georgia.
Oh, okay.
And the character of Bones McCoy is canonically from Georgia. So
okay, for some reason I thought that they had said he was from Kentucky.
I think he made a reference to Kentucky sometime, but no, he is canonically from Georgia.
Okay, good to know.
I didn't realize this until I was trying to prepare a presentation for this a couple years ago. But when he appears in the pilot episode of Next Generation, he's basically doing an old style Georgia accent, which he didn't do his Bones, but like he definitely
he sounds more southern.
He sounds more southern in the Encounter at Farpoint.
Yeah,
so,
he does.
I think it's only appropriate that someone in Georgia should take advantage of this, and I want to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, Georgia might as well claim the most outspoken racist in Star Trek. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the character, but the more I watch of him, the more I'm like, wow, he's just unapologetically pretty racist against anything non-human. Okay.
I want to lean more into he's a doctor. It's supporting future STEM, like part of the aspect.
All right. Well, like I said, we will be back next time reviewing the episode The Storm. So make sure you check that out. But until that time, moo.
Ah.